This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net
That was such a fun
to
age of
offer
Batman
your
comics
support
just in
now.
general, because
And
after
now,
this
on with
ball
the
of
show.
Nightwing rolled over, we got into all the other stuff like Contagion, and then you got Cataclysm and No Man's Land. Like, it had to be exhausting for you, because as a teenage guy reading comics back then, I was exhausted. Well, I was like, I can't keep up, but it was fun. It had me excited every week to just get into the stories, because I mean, it would spill into everything. So I imagine you guys kind of like, and I say this in a good way, like you shot yourself in the foot. Like, we made this amazing like crossover story. Now we got to keep up this momentum of like amazing like connected stories. Does that ring true, or was it?
Oh,
just...
yeah. Well, Contagion was literally exhausting because when we did Contagion, I had 3 monthlies that were
right. You're writing everything
right, and those 3 monthlies came out 1 week after another. In some cases, two came out at the same time. So I literally, it was either Doug or Alan had to wait on me for 3 scripts.
Oh, wow.
So 2 months in a row, because this happened twice during Contagion. You know, I had little kids at home, and there was no way I was going to be able to do this. So I literally checked into a hotel room for 3 days in a row and wrote a script a day for 3 days. And then the next month I had to do it again. And it was, that was grueling. The later crossovers, I again, I'm a logistics guy. Contagion, I didn't understand why we were doing it, because it didn't seem like a Batman story. He can't fight a disease, and then Cataclysm seemed like a Superman. It seemed like a Metropolis story to me rather than a Gotham story. What's he going to do against an earthquake? And, we all, I don't know how disenchanted the other guys were with it, but I did my best on it. I mean, there were a lot of cool stuff we could do. I love that skyscraper lying on its side. I used that to death. And I just they just didn't seem to pay off the way I thought they should have, and they just seemed not suited.
I actually really enjoy. I mean, I get what you're saying. As a reader, I really enjoyed Cataclysm just because it was so anti-Batman, and the way they set it up with it was own thing. The government shut it down, but it was cool to see Batman in a different element. So on that note, it felt fun to read. Again, it wasn't. It was. This is different. Like, how does Batman, the guy? I mean, and it goes with this character, the guy who can survive and be a part of any type of a story. How does he deal with a natural disaster? So to me, I thought that was fun. So
yeah, I just kept annoying everybody at the summits with logistics questions. Well, how would this work? How would that work?
You don't like the
BatmanUniverse.net, and by Batman on Films Podcast Network, BatmanPodcastNetwork.com. So through the Batman Universe and Batman on Film, you can find our show. You can get hold of us on all the social media outlets on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also email into the show at Robin ELTD Podcast. With me today is my good buddy Ryan. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, and I'm super happy to be back on one of these shows. It's been a little bit.
Yeah, it's been a little bit. I'm glad that the schedules worked out. As with schedules, Terrence is not here. Some things kind of came up in scheduling, but he gave us the high sign, as it were, to continue on, and we'll catch him in a later part. Before we get into Contagion, we're on the heels of, now that we're in the month of February, March will be the official 80th anniversary of Robin. So I wanted to talk about the covers that have recently come out. Now that they are finally all there, it felt like they...
Covers of to what?
The 100-page giant celebrating the 80th anniversary of Robin, of course.
So, there's a lot of anniversary things coming out this year from DC. We got Flash and Wonder Woman 750, right?
Joker
and a Catwoman 100-page thing, right?
Yeah.
All of them, yeah.
I think today Jim Lee released his cover for the Joker 100-page giant. If I'm saying that correctly, I know I saw a Jim Lee sketch today of the Joker, and it looked like it was very much like his Detective Comics tribute. Which, let's just start. We'll briefly go through them really quick. The main cover is going to be done by Lee Weeks, and I'm assuming it's the red cover that we've seen. I don't think it's the placeholder cover, like, hey, this is a temporary art, where it's got the... And if you go to Everyone Loves a Drake Twitter page, ELTD Podcast, or the Facebook page, I've been posting these all over the place. And all you have to do is just search any social media for Robin 80th, and everybody's been sharing these issues. But so if you check our pages, you will definitely see them. But the Lee Weeks cover is one of the ones that, again, I'm assuming this is the final cover, where it's got the Robin in the black banner at the top, and then Robin leaping off, and you can just see a fraction of Batman's cape. It's one that it seems a little bit more generic than what I was expecting from Lee Weeks. I think it looks cool, but for this to be the main cover, if somebody's just like, I'm just going to get just whatever cover they send to me, this is one I'm not really jumping up and down about. Robin is so small on the cover, and there's so much red, which, again, I think it looks cool composition wise, but it's one that I'm actually not planning on picking up.
It kind of reminds me of some of the more recent Robin, like Tim Drake trade paperbacks. I think it's meant to be eye catching for your general average, comic book store person, or even on a shelf at like a Barnes and Noble or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because those even get sold, like Detective 1000 and stuff like that is in regular stores and everything. So that's probably the reason why it's the most mainstream trade paperback looking version of it, and then they can get kind of wild and crazy with all the decade variants.
Right. Well, let's just talk about some of the decade variants. The first one up is Jim Lee's 1940 variant, which is the homage to Detective Comics 38. So very cool, and it's a nice little twist, like the camera's skewed just a little bit. I like it. Some people don't like Robin, the smile, and Batman, and Robin given like the rock on, like, devil horns or whatever. But I think it kind of captures, something cool. This is one I'm definitely getting. I'm getting a few of these. Shocker. But what'd you think of this one?
I like it. I mean, it's like an alternate angle of the classic, Robin jumping out of the hoop, image, and it does capture the era a lot, in the costumes and the attitude, and I think it's cool. Absolutely.
Cool. The 1950s one is the Juan Tedesco variant. This is not one that I'm picking up, but very cool. Batman's in the background. It almost looks like they're patterning this off of the serials. At least that's the way Batman looks in that.
It looks kind of like serials combined with the 60s TV show.
Yeah.
At least Robin does.
Right. Definitely. That's what I what I was trying to say. Again, another cool cover. This won't be one just because all these are going to have like a $9.99 price point. There's some places like Discount Comic Book Service that is going to have them for a little bit of a price point, but you got to figure in shipping. So, but yeah, this will be one, not because I don't like it, just trying to put my money in the best places. But next up is the 1960s variant by Dustin Nguyen. This one's cool. I'm not picking this one up. I really love Dustin Nguyen's art, but again, it was more of a dollar and cents decision. But this definitely has the Batman 60s vibe. Robin looks like he's in the Batmobile, and you got the little nods to the villains with the Joker smile and the Catwoman mask, and the question marks of the Riddler and the Penguin, and kind of like a 60s
Poison Ivy leaves.
Poison Ivy, yeah, very cool. Andrew's variant, the 1970s variant. This is really cool. I like this one. It's got Batgirl on the cover with the Robin signal and Batman in the classic blue and gray. And Pete Vera, if you're listening, yellow oval represent out there. So what do you think of this one?
He's got a Robin signal in the sky.
Robin signal, that's cool. I'm not purchasing either of those last two. This one is a hard pass right from the get-go.
I was excited about this one, as I usually am, to see things. And then when they do come out, I'm like... okay, pass.
Yeah. The Carrie Kelly, this was a foregone conclusion that the 80s was probably going to be, once I saw Frank Miller, I'm like, all right, it's definitely going to be Carrie Kelly. Part of me goes, well, Jason Todd was in the 80s. This would have been a good way to throw Jason Todd in there, but I get why Carrie Kelly was going to be on the cover, but man, this is rough. Yeah. So we'll move on. That's a definite pass. This was the one that a lot of us Drake fans were really waiting for, like, what are they going to do for the 90s? And I was even thinking the same thing for the 2000s, like, Tim's going to land on 2 covers, The Jim Chung variant. Now, the first time that we saw this was in sketch and inked cover, but then last week we got the full colored version of this. I love this. Some people were like, oh, Batman doesn't need to be on the cover of this one. And I think he definitely deserves to be on the cover along with Tim. Tim's right up there front and center, classic Robin costume, bow staff in hand, they're both leaping out, and just a nice little callback to Batman needs a Robin, Robin needs a Batman, and Tim and Bruce were so linked together for so long. I probably would have been a little disappointed if Batman had not been on this cover, but Tim's front and center. This is a definite must buy for me. I'm assuring you're probably picking this one up too. What do you think of this one?
Yeah, that's the main one I'm picking up for sure. I mean, it looks. I mean, it's Tim Drake. It looks great. It definitely almost has these Brian Boland type vibes to it too. I mean, and that's just kind of and it looks cool. Like, and I don't know, like all this artwork we've been seeing the pencil versions and then getting it colored, and it's like, man, I almost wish they would just release this as a black and white variant, and I want to get that.
Oh yeah,
yeah, it's cool. Yeah, that's definitely one of the 2 or maybe 3 I'm going to pick up.
This next one is a must for me. The Derek Chu.
I'm kind of shocked about this. That this one is what they chose for the 2000s.
Yeah, I am too. I thought this would have been very easy to do a Tim Drake in the 1 year later.
No, I thought 2000s would be Damian easily.
See, I wasn't entirely sure. Like, yes, he was introduced in the 2000s, but I don't think he actually really became Robin until the very latter part of getting into the 90s. Well, actually, no, you're absolutely right. I think Tim and
Batman and
really
Son was 2006.
Yeah, that's true.
So.
Yeah, now that you say that, I think I guess I was thinking a little bit more coming out of the 90s and going into the 2000s. Yeah, because the New 52 hits in 2009. So, like I said, Batman Son's 2006.
And Grant Morrison's Batman and Robin was 2009.
2009, yeah. So I guess I am. Yeah, I was more of like, they gave a nod to Stephanie Brown, and we'll get into that in the last cover. But I think it's a beautiful cover. I'm definitely going to pick this one up too. But now that you say that, yeah, I am kind of surprised that Damian's not.
I mean, especially because there's not a Damian cover or a Jason Todd cover. That's what's kind of interesting is that and then they pick Carrie Kelly and Stephanie Brown on 2 of the covers. I'm kind of interested.
Yeah,
that they went that way.
And then the last cover is the Yasmin Prutri, if I'm always butchering names here, the 2010 variant, which I think this is weird that they're going with 2010 with this one, but it is all of the Robins.
Yeah.
And
Robin.
As Robin, yeah. It wasn't like the Brave and the Bold cartoon series comic book, the Calling All Robins, where they're all Robins, but Dick Grayson, who's Nightwing. And
Exactly.
I think this is really clever that they chose correct or a different costume for the Robins to let you know who they are. Because if they would have...
isn't it basically like the... someone inspired by like the New 52 and Rebirth, like when they try to go do flashbacks and be like, well, this is what this character looked like back in the day, except for Dick Grayson, of course. He's like the traditional looking Robin.
Right.
But they've done some extra stuff, like Jason Todd has a red mask, which I think is a cool addition.
Yep. And he's in his New 52 suit.
Right.
And some people are like, he's even got a crowbar. I'm like, no, it's not a crowbar. It's a tire iron.
It's a tire iron.
Which is like, this is what I use to take the wheel off the Batmobile, which got me to chuckle. This is where I would have put Carrie Kelly. Well, I mean, they're both here. Like, Carrie and Stephanie are both in here. The nod for the both of them being on this cover would have been like, oh, they're representing their cover. And it's really funny that aside from Dick, who it's technically his 80th anniversary, but of course Robin's as a whole, Dick gets a lion's share of the covers, but Tim, Stephanie, and Carrie are on, 2 to 3 covers themselves, or actually 2 covers each being their own solo cover, plus this one, which only leaves Jason and Damian as their only cover here. And initially, when Yasmin posted this image on Twitter, they had just posted the Damian portion. I was like, oh, this is the Damian cover, only to find out it's much larger. So this is one I'm definitely getting, and I think this probably could have been and maybe should have been the main 80th anniversary cover. I really like this. And if Terrence was here, he would ask me, Rob, this is a poster, right? Yes, I really want this as a print. Or this cover just makes me smile ear to ear. It's all the Robins. It's a sea of red, green, yellow, and black. And I absolutely adore this cover.
Of course. I mean, it's tailor-made for Rob.
Yeah, it's definitely. There's Rob Myers. This guy in Ohio is really going to love this cover.
Yeah.
This was initially slotted for, if I have the information here, March 18th, March 19th, I believe, is when that was initially. Let me check here real quick. Probably edit in here.
I think it was for March 11th.
Yes, March 11th. Yes, and it's going to March the 18th. So we just recently pushed it back a week. And I'm fine with that. And a lot of the artists are probably still working on stuff. It's probably... The art's going to get turned in and printed probably pretty quick, I would imagine. So be on the lookout for this.
Do you see, like, this description is pretty interesting of the book? And they give, like, each Robin kind of their own, like, adjective. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I agree with all of them.
Yeah.
But essentially it's like high-flying adventures of Dick Grayson, tragedy of Jason Todd, enthusiasm of Tim Drake, arrogance of Damian Wayne, persistence of Stephanie Brown, and rebelliousness of Carrie Kelly. Most of those fit.
Yeah.
Except for maybe Tim's. I mean,
Tim's sounds a little... I don't know.
I don't know what else I would say. There surely is something else, like the brilliance of Tim Drake. Like
that's what I would have gone with.
Yeah, something like that.
All right, there was a look at our thoughts on the 80th anniversary issue that's coming out next month for Robin. So this is a good segue to get to our main topic, Contagion. This is something that Terrence has been kind of poking at me the last couple shows of like, Rob keeps coming up with these different episodes just to avoid Contagion, which I wouldn't say that's totally 100%. Some of these other things just kind of happened, but there was that spot of like, how are we going to do this? So
this is like training wheels for all of the giant crossovers that are to come soon.
Yeah. So I thought probably the best way to do it is kind of like we did, like, it really pained me to, like, do Nightfall in a small chunk because we just could have had a Nightfall podcast. So luckily, there's going to be this Azrael podcast that'll come out soon, eventually.
Eventually. If things can just die down, in my personal life, just a little bit, then we'll get the show out. I mean, my people that are following the show on Twitter know this, but basically me and Matt Whaley, my co-host, we've actually recorded like 4 episodes of the show.
Yeah.
So we're making them. They're banked. I just need to start editing them, and we're getting them done ahead of time so we have content to just release consistently once the show launches. But taking that jump from, we're just recording and having fun to getting it posted is a little bit of a jump at the moment, but it's still coming, so it's closer than it's ever been. So just keep waiting.
I remember those days of like, I've got 3 shows in the can, and then eventually something happens where you're like, I've got no shows in the can. But that'll be cool to hear how you guys, get into Nightfall and talking about, because that's huge for Jean-Paul. Not that, the Sword of Azrael isn't great, but getting into just the Jean-Paul Valley side of what Nightfall is going to be really cool for you guys to hear. So I've got my ticket. I'm waiting in line.
Well, hey, you and many others, which is good. I mean, it's good that people are excited enough to keep asking about the show and when it's going to start. So when it does start, hopefully we'll have kind of a nice built-in little listenership at the start of it.
But in thinking about, it was actually Nightfall that got me thinking about this, and it's kind of odd to say that this is the first, other than some of like the Underworld Unleashed and like wide DC events, this is the first major Batman crossover event since Nightfall. If you can think back to, the end of 93, if I got my timeline right, when Nightfall quasi sort of wrapped up of what the landscape looked like for DC. And here we are in 96 when this is launching, that, there's more books now in the Batman universe and more players. So this was kind of a ambitious and advantageous, if that's the word I want to use, I guess, to think about, doing another Batman crossover. And this is the topic that they chose. And if you heard the cold opening of the show, you kind of hear where one of the main scribes of the show was coming from. So really quick before we get involved into the episode, I just kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit. And I'll say that at the time, we're talking 96. So this ran from like March through April of 1996. I was, now 4 years out of high school. So I was fully into my rocker mode, playing in the bars and the clubs, behind the drum kit. So I wasn't buying as many comics at the time. And it's also one of those, if you would have asked me 2 years ago to tell you the story of Contagion, I could not do it as detailed as I could every single beat of Nightfall. So I think we kind of know where Contagion lands. But for you, as just, I guess, the 500-foot view before we start going through this, did Contagion hit you in any way, or is this kind of one of the first times you're really reading it, or was it like, oh, I read Contagion and it's over and done with?
Well, I mean, when it initially came out, I was only like 9 years old, so I definitely didn't read it when it first came out. I only knew about Contagion in a passing, cursory way because I did as a kid when the we've talked about this on the show before. When Batman Legacy was first released as a trade paperback, I got that as a gift from my mom for like an Easter present or something. It was like, oh, here's this cool Batman graphic novel, and it's like, oh, it looks so badass and everything, and so I read that, and that was one of the coolest Batman stories I've ever read. And so at the beginning of that trade paperback, there is like a primer, basically, of like, here's all the story stuff that kind of happened beforehand, and it just shows you little bitty story beats of like images from the earlier stories that lead up to Legacy. Contagion being one of them. So I just had like a very brief like, oh, there was a contagion, there was a virus, and they've got to stop it, and that was before, and now here's this new story. So that's all I really knew, and I've had bits and pieces of the issues for a few years, but I hadn't really sat down and read any of them until now.
Cool. And I really think that's where I was too with a lot of Contagion. Again, that I was a little far removed and things would pull me back in and out. And I had the Robin issues, but it was still like, oh, there's this disease, and I really didn't think much about it. So I can honestly say that this is the first straight read through that I've done. So I'm about halfway through the story for the podcast. So what we're going to do right here, folks, we're going to take a quick little commercial break. We'll probably even hear one of our own and some other promos. When we come back, Ryan and I are going to go through the first part of Contagion, finally here on Everyone Loves a Drake. We'll be right back in a few minutes. Don't go anywhere.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarterbin Podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarterbin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarterbin Podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarterbin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
Hey, Jared, I have a question.
What's up?
Well, I've been a part of the Longbox Crusade for about a year and a half now.
Yeah? Well, that's not a question, man.
I know, I'm getting to it. That was called Build Up. Like I was saying, I've been with the Longbox Crusade and I have gone out and represented the show faithfully.
That's still not a question.
I'm still building up. I was wondering, could I be a part of the official promo? There's this great promo for the podcast that airs across podcast land, and it has Pat Sampson, the founder of the show, you, the art cell artist, and your brother Jason, aka Weasel Skull. But it doesn't have me, Delvin Williams, the Dark Web. Could you ask the guys if they would let me be a part of the promotion, since you were the one who invited me onto the show?
Well, not to be a Mr. Quick to correct, but that was at least 2 questions. Still, I guess I'll ask. Let me go talk to the guys and you stay here.
Okay, great. Thanks, man.
Hey, guys.
Hey, what's up, Jared?
What's up, Jared?
I have a question. Delvin's been with us for like a year and a half.
That's not a question.
Yeah, I know. It's called Build Up. Hey, can we finally include him on the promo? It's the least we can do. He doesn't know that we're getting paid yet.
And he never will. I mean, do we need him? After all, we already have the Longbox Crusade.
And I provide awesome synopsis and insight on Crusader Chronicles.
And I host Saturday Matinee Theater and also provide These Nuts jokes.
Hey, I do that.
Me too. So we're fine as it is. What does Delvin do? We should just let him go.
Wait, he hosts Transformers Chronicles. You should know that, Pat. You're on that show. So what do you say? Can we keep him?
Fine, let's do it. Let's do it live. We could have done this with him in the room. It would have made more sense. Why is he outside?
I think we were doing a bit. Okay, let's do this.
The Longbox Crusade Podcast Network is the place to be if you like deep dives in the comics of yesteryear with the Longbox Crusade, chronological reading journals with Crusader Chronicles, indexing forgotten TV shows, films, and serials with Saturday Matinee Theater, pitting 2 randomly selected action films against one another in Action Film Face-Off, cataloging the Marvel run of the Transformers comic with Transformers Chronicles, and whatever else the demented minds of Pat, Jared, Jason, and Delvin can come up with. If that sounds like it might be for you, be sure to subscribe to The Longbox Crusade on iTunes, Google Play, and pretty much all reputable podcast feeds. Or check us out directly at www.longboxcrusade.com, where we continue our quest to...
In April of 1940, at DC
Scott Lobdell? No!
Okay, while I give my co-hosts a minute or so to digest all of this information, you can find our show, Robin Everyone Loves the Drake Comic Podcast, through the BatmanUniverse.net podcasting network. Also available on Apple Podcasts or wherever you traditionally listen to your podcasts from. Now, if you excuse me, I think Terrence might need a bottle of water. Or maybe a paper bag.
No! New 52!
It's gonna be okay, Terrence. It's gonna be okay.
Change of Tim Drake's origin.
Don't worry, Terrence.
Crazy Red Robin costume.
It's gonna be okay. Maybe it won't happen.
All right, we're back. So, Contagion. Now, what's going to happen here, like I said in the beginning of the episode, you're going to hear a couple of pre-recorded synopsis for Batman Shadow of the Bat. You're going to hear Detective Comics, and that will lead us up to our discussion. So if you're doing your homework, if you want to read along with us, that's great. If not, the books that Ryan and I are more specifically talking about and some other bullet points from the other issues, we're basically going to do like we did with Nightfall and try and follow Tim or the bigger beats, but Tim is really through a lot of this and really towards the tail end of the book really becomes a big narrative plot point for Bruce and the Bat family. So we'll dance around this the best we can. So Robin 47 and Catwoman 31.
No. Robin 27. Rob.
27.
You said 47, and then I found Robin 47, and I was like, I think this is wrong.
Rob even typed 47 wrong in his show notes, so good catch. Ryan read a book he probably shouldn't have and curses Rob. So Robin 27 and Catwoman 31. So I will be reading these out of the Batman Contagion book that my wife so lovely gave me for Christmas, and this is a really thick book. So without further ado, let's start our coverage of Batman Contagion. Batman and the extended Bat family are confronted with something of which they have never encountered before as crime fighters. A disease. As you heard in the cold opening of the show, Chuck Dixon spoke to us on Batman on Film episode 115's 20th anniversary of Nightfall. On it, Ryan, Justin Kowalski, and myself were lucky enough to be part of it. In the clip, you heard him briefly talk about Contagion and some of the latter crossovers he worked on. Is Chuck right? Is this an appropriate story, of which he would say he was a part of and put his best foot forward, but still, can Batman and Robin punch their way out of something like this? Can they, right? Contagion is the name of the story that ran through various Batman titles in the monthly series from March 1996 through April of 1996. It concerns itself with the breakout of a lethal disease in Gotham City, and Batman attempts to combat it. In the events of the story that leads Batman through Legacy, Contagion, and Cataclysm and finds himself into the intro of Batman No Man's Land. As much of the plot concerns around the gated community in the middle of Gotham City, whose wealthy residents believe they can protect themselves from the plague by sealing themselves inside, only to discover that one of their members is the plague's first carrier. In the story, parallels to Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Masquerade of the Red Death, which one of the community's dying a resident mentions. This is our coverage of Tim Drake in Contagion. All the information on these issues that you will hear today come from Mike'sAmazingWorld.com, a great resource to find out all of the information that's inside of your comics, who wrote what and who did what in the comics, Mike'sAmazingWorld.com. And now the credits for Batman Shadow of the Bat number 48. The cover date is March 1996. The on-sale date is January 16, 1996, with a cover price of $1.95. The editor is Dennis J. O'Neill. The title, The Apocalypse Plague. Writer is Alan Grant. The penciler is Vince Giordano, if I'm saying that correctly. Probably not. The inker is Ray A. McCarthy. The letterer is Bill Oakley, and the colorist is Pamela Rambo. And the cover credits go to Brian Stelfreeze. The synopsis for these issues comes to us by DC Wiki, a fandom page, with a few little tweaks by yours truly. Contagion, Part 1. Azrael sends Batman a video showing the horrible effects of a highly contagious virus developed by the Order of Saint Dumas and tells Batman that the plague is headed for Gotham City. Batman decided to get some information from the United States Army and has given Robin the task of tracking down the man who is carrying the virus in his body. Batman tells the new police commissioner, Andrew Howe, about the virus, but Howe won't listen. Batman then forces his way into an Army secret installation to learn about the virus and to see if there is a way to find a possible cure. He finds the head investigator in an isolation room. The man has acquired the virus and was dying without any chance of survival. The general tells Batman that the virus is a variant of the Ebola virus named Ebola Gulf A. The general tells Batman that the symptoms and the virus have mutated too fast to develop a cure. Their only hope is to find a survivor, someone that has been infected but has survived, with no side effects. After telling all that he knew, the general dies because of the virus. When Batman gets himself out of the secret installation, Robin tells him that he found a man carrying the disease, the man called Daniel Maris. He was the only man arriving to Gotham from Africa in the last few hours, and he was staying at Babylon Towers. Maris was carrying the virus unknowingly. He is an acolyte for the Order of Saint Dumas and has acted as a chairman in the Babylon Towers. His mission was to enclose himself and the other residents of Babylon Towers inside so the virus could eliminate the entire city of Gotham without affecting those people inside Babylon. What he didn't know was that he was carrying the virus, and by the time he exposed the plan to the Babylon residents, all the people who Maris had been in contact with were already infected by the virus. The writer is Chuck Dixon, the penciler is Mike Rowingo. As both of them are looking for plague survivor Kendall Stewart, though for very different reasons. Robin soon realizes that most efficient way of finding Stewart would be to work together with Catwoman, a measure Alfred is somewhat dubious about. Meanwhile, the Kletch, the virus, continues to claim many victims, including the Palomoy family. And one of the most recent infected is Montoya's boyfriend, Johnny. Panic sets in, and the news of the plague is broadcast, and an exit and entrance to Gotham is forbidden. Robin and Catwoman track down Kendall Stewart, but so does a mercenary, Tracker, who attacks them. Intending on to taking Stewart himself, Azrael is sent by Batman, who also arrives on the scene with his flaming sword in hand. So, What did you think about Robin 27 and getting to see? And actually, before we go into that, this is one of the first major introductions, other than briefly getting to see Azrael. But this is Azrael's first major reintroduction back to the Batman family. And at first, Bruce is wanting to keep Azrael's interaction in with what is going on through Gotham City a secret from Tim. Do you think that is a smart move on Bruce's part at first, that he's kind of keeping Azrael and Tim kind of on a short leash from one another?
I think that sounds very much like something Batman would do, trying to control things. And we see other characters do that later on. So yeah, it definitely seems like Batman trying to be the smartest guy in the room, which of course he is for the most part.
Which is really kind of interesting hearing that clip from Chuck. I mean, Chuck is writing, detective, he's writing Robin, he's writing Catwoman. So he's got 3 of the main books writing through here. And I'm not sure who the main architect was, but this still really feels like a Chuck Dixon story to some degree. I got to say, in the very beginning, going through the Shadow of the Bat book, the art was really kind of rough through those first 2 issues, and even the art in Detective, the artist is escaping me. I gave the credits in the...
Yeah, I kind of wondered if it was because the crossover where they were trying to get it out to where there's one part a week. I didn't really look at the release schedule. Yeah. I don't know if there was like some weeks there were 2 of these a week or something to try to get all the story done.
Yeah.
Something like that going on.
I think what really starts to make it feel like, all right, we're kind of going through somewhere. There's a couple little nods that they put in the Detective Comics story. You've got Batman and Robin walking up the building, a la 1966 there. Detective is really where they start thrusting Tim into the main part of the story and getting into the Robin book. I think once you get into the Robin book and Catwoman, I started going, all right, this is really starting to feel like a Batman crossover again. The front cover to 27, it's another Raringo cover, which I'm really becoming a fan of Raringo now. I don't think I really was at first, but now hindsight being 2020, I love the energy in this cover. And it looks like this could be the toy box cover for the Catwoman action figure. Like, oh, we're going to get...
I was about to say, it's toyetic, but in a good way. And like even in the issue, we get that moment, right? And it looks like... And this is like a comment on the whole story as a whole. It's a really good balance, I think, of character work and interactions and story and visuals. I mean, it feels like a 90s comic, of course, but it's also... I mean, it's just got a really good vibe to it overall.
Yeah, and even the beginning, again, we've said a lot on the show that Dixon wants to start off the story with action coming from the preceding issue where he's coming into Stewart's apartment trying to track him down. And bam, they're right off to the races with Robin and Catwoman fighting, which in one of our not too distant episodes, this is the second meeting that Robin and Catwoman have had when we had the, I'm forgetting their names now.
The Cyber Rats?
The Cyber Rats. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That's kind of cool seeing them here. And you kind of get that built-in little uneasiness from Robin here. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you starting this thing off is... On the wall, I noticed, in addition to Chuck Dixon liking third base, Robin makes a reference to the Jerky Boys, which...
That's amazing. That is like super 90s.
Yes. The whole, if And again,
and he was able to get, Dixon was able to skirt the third base stuff because, that's just the goofy artist putting stuff in there. But he's got the straight up line in this comic book that he wrote about the Jerky Boys.
Right.
So,
yeah. So as you heard, leading into this, I did throw a little Jerky Boys in there, which I had not listened to the Jerky Boys since 1996. So the Jerky Boys was a thing. There was a movie in the movie theaters at the time that this book came out. So Chuck, if you're listening, we know you at least like the Jerky Boys. So like I said, this is the second meeting in a team up for Robin and Catwoman. Does Tim seem better equipped this time around dealing with Catwoman? And I just want to point out, like, the coloring on the roof after they've had their fight. Adrian Roy is just delivering some great work in this. And I think also...
Oh, yeah. I definitely wanted to bring that up, too. It's like the classic Adrian Roy.
Yeah.
Yellow cast and blue, dark. I mean, it works so effectively every time. And I just love seeing it.
And like I said, I'm reading this out of the trade, so I don't have the actual comic in front of me, but I think her colors and the artwork just sings off the page anyway. What I also like that Dixon is doing in this is Robin is there to save the world, but Catwoman is still there looking for the reward. Like, this is a guy that, as far as they know, is the only one that's immune to the plague, so if she can, get him and sell him for the highest bidder, she's still that borderline villain. I think it's really interesting now that here we are in 2020 and Catwoman is seen as more of a hero and more of an equal to Batman. But in the 90s, she wasn't. And I always really thought that was interesting that we're giving a villain a comic book. I'm like, really? How does Catwoman sustain a comic book? When is she going to fall to the side? So I know they've always played that line with her, but I like that they don't totally tip the scale like, oh, she's a hero. There's still that little...
She's still an anti-hero, more on the she's out for herself kind of thing. And a little in this version of Catwoman is a little bit less, romantically inclined with Batman, especially because she was introduced during Nightfall, right? Which is kind of weird to say, but she was, and some of her first interaction with Batman was not with Bruce Wayne Batman, it was with Azrael.
Yeah. Now, this is something that my later comic book knowledge is kind of kicking in, that Montoya having a boyfriend in this, I was like, so this was a note that I made mention, and maybe Ryan's following along here, but with Montoya being straight, I don't remember that always being a thing. Was that something like... After 50...
No. Her Montoya being a lesbian was introduced much later, right? By Greg Rucka in Gotham Central, right?
Gotham Central, okay.
Yeah, so she was straight for a few years, and then they were able to, retcon or add more depth to her character, which makes these earlier comic book appearances interesting in with that context to see the kind of progression of the character.
Yeah, that was... I didn't realize that was going... It's going back this far with her character. I guess we've been living with that's how Montoya is, and I think that's great. But I guess I didn't realize that was more something new. I was thinking 52, but you're right, Gotham Central.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was a Rucka thing. Yeah.
Raringo drawing Batman and Penguin. I don't think Raringo gets a chance to draw Batman enough in the Robin series, again, because it's the Robin book, but getting to see him draw some classic villains, there's a very superpowers, again, not bad, like a toyetic Penguin here, or very classic, leaning more towards the 60s villain Penguin. Just the couple little shots that you see him in the Iceberg Lounge where he's got the lighter, and again, wonderful coloring by Adrian Roy, but those couple pages of Batman trying to do one of the last things that he thinks that he can do is, intimidate somebody, and there's this disease going around. So if I go into, the Penguin's got his hands in everything, and I can, rough the Penguin up and help fight this disease, which, hearing Chuck Dixon's comment, you can't go around punching a disease, and for whatever information you think you're going to get from the Penguin, he can tell you maybe where it originated from, but you still have the containment process of the disease. So what did you think about just this little section with the Penguin? I really dug it, and it's kind of one of those moments where this is one of the last traditional Batman moments of him wanting to fight and punch something. He's going to have to attack this from a different way.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of the thesis for this story is kind of coming to play in scenes like this. And it's great to see the setup, and of course the artwork. I mean, Ringo's style is almost like a Graham Nolan, but with more stylization to it, I guess is the best way I can say it. And it's really cool to see. I mean, Chuck Dixon told us this about how can Batman fight a disease, and then some of those lines actually show up. Like these are the things that Batman says. I think later on, I think he talks about it to Gordon about how can he battle this? How can he do this? And he's it's Dixon kind of talking to the audience a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. It's not until Robin that we get the character mentioned. We have a level 4 Contagion is the first time it's mentioned in context of going here. So I didn't know. I had actually forgotten that somebody spoke those words in here. Sometimes you're like, all right, we're going to mention Nightfall or the story's called Nightfall.
Right.
No character is actually going to say Nightfall. So it actually works in here. So that was just a little thing that I noticed here. Catwoman tells Robin if Batman knew who he was playing with, he'd have kittens, which I thought was funny, which Dixon's little turn of phrase there. Is it wise to keep this from Batman? And do you think he already knows that, well, Catwoman's probably there and dealing with Robin, but I also think it's funny that Batman is doing the same thing and not letting.
Yeah,
Robin
I think it's
know
more that both Robin and Batman are working with people that the other one probably would have something to say about, and then it all comes to a head towards the end of the issue. You know, with your extra assassin mercenary guy thrown in.
In the trade, it's kind of hard to tell. It's so weird. They have colored out the pages, probably not the page numbers, rather. It's done really weird, actually. So you can kind of tell in some pages what the numbers are, but you get the shot of Alfred in front of the Wayne jet. I thought, Ringo does a really great Alfred here, and just the conversation that Tim and Alfred are having, and working with Catwoman, and Alfred doesn't think it's the right thing to do, but we get the shot on the following page of Catwoman in her snowsuit, which I thought was a little like Robin's not in his Robin snowsuit. I was going through the Lego video game, and the old Batman Lego game, and you got the containment suit, so you get to put the characters in different suits, and I'm like, this really feels like a toy thing to do. We're going to go out to the wilderness, we're going to go out to the snow, let me put on my onesie in all white so I can blend in with the snow. And I had forgotten they had done that, but it's nice that it's not just the cover that it's done. It works practically. And she says, thanks for waiting. I was dying to execute my outfit. She goes, do you like it? And that little moment of Tim
and Robin's just is gobsmacked. Yeah.
So I think this is a beautiful shot of Batman on top of the building.
Oh, I love this page. Oh,
this is great. This is a great page of Batman with the cape kind of draped around him. He's kind of pulling it up to his chest. And you can just see around the side, the right side of the panel, some of the flyer coming up from, which we later realize is Azrael's sword. But this is where Azrael first comes into the picture. And the way that Adrian Roy lights up Batman's face and you get to see the glow of the sword, I think is so very cool. I would be thinking as an Azrael fan, it's and I don't even know if this might be Ringo's first time drawing Azrael.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if this is the first time that Batman has really partnered up with Azrael at all since Nightfall. Yeah. Okay, yeah, because in the Azrael solo series, I think they're almost around to issue 15 or so. So Azrael's kind of been doing his own thing for a little while, and now he's coming back into the picture, and it's cool for me as an Azrael fan to see this uneasy alliance start to form between them, and just Batman's interaction with the character, and then seeing how this dovetails back into Azrael series is really it's really fun to see.
This moves through them going to Canada, which I thought was interesting too, that's where they're leaving the U.S. to go find out, and where Kendall Stewart is. He's one of the last known survivors that has not come down with this disease. So Catwoman and Robin have this kind of uneasy alliance. All right, we're going to go check it out. And Tracker, for lack of a better name, is a mercenary who meets up with, actually kind of gets there right after Robin and Catwoman do, and is going to drag Stewart out the front door. And then we see this glorious shot at the end of the issue of Azrael standing in the front door, flaming sword, and coming in to do some damage and hopefully save Robin and Catwoman's behind and get Stewart out of there. But I thought this was a great splash page. Very little text on there. Stewart turned around, gives the and a very small to be continued at the end. But I thought, what a strong way to end. The first part of this was a lot of exposition and what was going on in the Babylon apartment complex, where everybody thinks that they're being safe. And so that was kind of a little chunky to kind of get through. But I thought the story really kind of picked up here in these latter two. So what'd you think of the Azrael's entrance and before we get into Catwoman?
Yeah, these two issues, that this one and the one we're about to talk about, it gets very action-y, James Bondy and zippy, you know? And it's kind of, it reminds me a lot of kind of the way that Legacy reads when we get to that a little bit later. But yeah, this is where you start to get all these cool character interactions: Batman, Azrael, Robin, Catwoman, and just seeing things play out. And I moved recently, so I don't have the physical issues. I've been reading this on my iPad with DC Universe, because most of these issues are just in DC Universe, and it's great reading this on an iPad just because the colors are nice, they pop, and all the nice Adrian Roy coloring just kind of really just jumps off the page. It's kind of a fun way to go back through these issues.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's just keep the story moving on for our last book. We're going to go right into Catwoman. 31 has a cover date of late March 1996 with an on-sale date of January 30th, 1996. The cover price is $1.95, with the editor being Dennis J. O'Neill. The title, Flesh and Fire. The writer is Chuck Dixon. The penciler is Dick Giordano, doing pencils over Jim Ballant's layouts. The inker is Robert Allen Smith. The letter is Albert Tobias D. Gunsman. The colorist is Buzz Seltzer, and the cover artist is Jim Ballant. Azrael breaks into the cabin where Robin and Catwoman and Tracker are while struggling for the virus's only survivor, Kendall Stewart. Catwoman and Tracker and Azrael start to fight each other, and Robin tries to take Stewart out to a safe place. Outside the shack, Robin is attacked by some men and tells Stewart to run and to find a hiding place, knowing that Gotham's only hope was in danger. And without him there would be no payment. Azrael and Catwoman and Tracker join forces to protect the man. They manage to track down some of the assassins, but in the end, Stewart freaks out and is shot by one of the killers. Before he dies, Stewart tells Catwoman and Azrael only as Robin was running up to them. Aftermath, too late to hear Stewart's final words. Robin takes a sample of the blood of Stewart's and heads back to Gotham City. Azrael and Catwoman and Tracker decide to search the other survivors separately. Meanwhile, in Gotham, Batman calls upon Nightwing to help out, as the virus has claimed a lot more victims in Gotham City. Robin leaves Canada and feels as if he has failed, and Azrael and Catwoman have discussed further options, and Azrael says he doesn't tell Robin for his own good. So that is the synopsis for Catwoman, and I think the cover for Catwoman 31, I don't know, is totally as strong as Ballant has done before, but I think it's a really energetic cover, and it kind of makes Catwoman look like Iceman a little bit, like she's gliding.
She's like creating the ice that she's riding on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's...
Now, is this not when Ballant is doing another book? And that's why for a few issues of Catwoman here, he's doing basically the layouts and...
Yeah.
And like in this particular issue, Dick Giordano is doing the pencils over his thumbnails.
Yeah. Yep. So you can kind of see that a little bit, which, you know, I was a little disappointed at the time, but he was on a second book, and I have it in the notes somewhere, so hopefully it'll resurface.
Yeah, I don't remember which one it is, but I think he was a little overworked. But he also did not want to stop penciling Catwoman. He wanted to be the Catwoman guy as long as humanly possible, so that's why for a little stretch there he was kind of still having part in the issues without being able to draw all of them completely.
Yeah. Now, what I really like is a splash page of Robin, Catwoman, and Azrael. Now, Balin and Giordano do a really good job both. And I think this is probably the strongest panel for where you can really see that Balin had probably a lot more done that Giordano just had to do some light works on, but still, I think Azrael looks great, and a typical Jim Ballant move would be to have Catwoman's boobs or butt right in the front.
Yeah, in an impossible position that shows everything. Yeah, that's very 90s comic book for sure.
But I think this looks really good, and I would like to have seen Balin and Giordano draw more Azrael, especially the shot here. I know Raringo draws them a little bit different, but I've always liked Azrael's like spiky, almost kind of like Dove's cape would be.
Yeah.
A little bit. And this is actually probably, I'll be curious when you guys start going through getting to Azrael's costume change, but this is still my favorite look and favorite version of Azrael.
Yeah, me too.
But, and this
when you go back to the cover, this was labeled Contagion 4, but the Azrael issue after this is also labeled Contagion 4, so it gets real confusing.
And I think in the audio sample that you'll hear me read about these, given the show credits, is that there was a mistake in the numbering. So Azrael should have been 5, so everything got numbered wrong. I think towards the tail end, they got the numbering right, but there were 2 4s, 2 5s for a while.
Oh, really? So there was more than just the 4s. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
I think they kept doubling them up until the part 6 and part 7, I think, were the last 2 doubled numbers. This is also the first rematch and fight of Catwoman and Azrael since we last saw them in
Night Quest.
Night Quest in Catwoman 6 and Batman number 3. Or Batman 503, excuse me. So that was right after Jean-Paul had claimed the mantle of Batman and had beaten Bane.
Right, and there's a little bitty callback in here on page 5 of the issue where Azrael says, "You're the thief who calls herself Catwoman," and she says, "We've met, right?" Yes, they have, but as a different character.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice little callback. And again, it's something we've said many times on the show. I would love to see Dixon's tack board with twine of okay, I mentioned this here, and this goes back. Oh, yeah. Here. So, and these 2 issues, and I think it's in a later note, but I feel like I'm just going to jump ahead to this one. It says, for this being Catwoman's book, she plays the back seat in most of her own issue to Robin. And this is Dixon's.
Yeah, I kind of forgot it was a Catwoman book there for a little bit until the a Catwoman thought bubble would pop back up on page 8. I'm like, oh yeah, this is Catwoman. This is a Catwoman's book.
And I think that's what I like the most about Dixon's writing. He's not writing, I've got to write this more from the Catwoman persona. He's writing it for the story's sake, and if the lead character doesn't happen to be in the book, even in Tim's book for a while, you got Batman coming in, giving some major exposition for a while, and Tim's just playing, hit, punch, run for the better part of his book, and all of the main story is coming through ancillary characters. I think that's just a testament to Dixon is writing for the story and not necessarily writing for the character. Something else I wanted to ask you, is this over Robin's head? Is the mission by accident? Did Batman send Tim to Canada on purpose? So just so he'd be out of danger? There is so much of a plague and everything going on in Gotham City. I'm trying to get Tim away far as possible from this.
No, I think that's ancillary. I think he really does trust Robin and really does want Robin to do some stuff, because even later on, Azrael's like, you really trust what this kid thinks, right? And I think that's true. I think Batman really believes in Tim, or he wouldn't let Tim be Robin. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So now I've only read up to the Azrael book in the next chapter, so I haven't gotten much farther. My memory is not jogging right. So if I'm kind of curious. It says Batman's going out talking to Commissioner Gordon to try and bury the hatchet a little bit, because they're footing is still a little off from everything that's happened through Nightfall and up to recently. Gordon is not the police commissioner at the moment. There is some knucklehead doofus in there at the moment. Sarah Essen's not even commissioner. Is Gordon affected right here for the first time with this plague, or is he just happened to be outside in the cold?
That's a good question, and I am not sure what the answer to that is.
We will have to find out. So Stewart died by a shotgun while Robin was trying to protect him, and Azrael and Catwoman hear Stewart's last words. Now Azrael is doing this because he's trying to do right. Is he trying to do this right by Tim, or does he have other motives from Batman? And are he and Catwoman responsible for Stewart's death because they were fighting out there? They left Robin out there fighting all of these would-be assassins, and Stewart got killed in the line of it. By the time they get out there, Stewart's already dead. Do you think they're more to blame for...
I think that's tough because things just got super crazy, super fast with like 3 or 4 different parties trying to come at this from different angles. And I'm not going to say they did the best that they could, because they were totally like fighting amongst each other, for, Catwoman and the Tracker, at least for, the money, and Azrael just burning everything in the meantime. But yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate, but I think they all share the blame pretty equally.
Yeah. Now, this also ends on a very hefty cliffhanger with Montoya's boyfriend being exposed and presumably dead. So we're really not sure how the disease is spreading at this point. So
yeah, there was that one really kind of panel you can read into where it showed the boyfriend back in the apartment, like banging his head against the glass, and the glass was breaking and stuff. I mean, you really had to kind of pay attention to that panel to notice that's what's happening. But it's like, ooh, that's a little rough.
Yeah,
especially knowing where he ends up.
Yeah, definitely. So that begs the question: are now is Montoya affected at this point? Is she now going to be affecting Harvey? So I know that when Dixon was talking about, he was a little underwhelmed on how, just the idea. I mean, Dixon is still writing a very strong story, and for somebody that may not have been totally into the idea, he's still presenting a very strong story. And just getting out of this last book, I was like, I'm really kind of curious to continue on into the story and figure out, is Gordon sick? Is, with Montoya having, just relations with her boyfriend, is she by proxy infected? And now is she passing that on to Bullock as well? So I thought this was a solid entry to the Contagion story. Now, where it goes from here will be, left to us to decide, and you, the listeners out there. But what are your final thoughts of the story so far for Contagion, and where, what are you expecting is going to happen out of this?
I mean, I kind of know what happens. But,
well, yeah, but as far as does it land for you?
Yes, I mean, as far as we've gotten so far, I mean, the story does have kind of a rocky, complex first couple issues to set everything up. But now that it's getting into the more action-packed, swashbuckling-ish second act. And it's just fun and intriguing to finally see all these characters start to interact during this new status quo. And since it's part of a big crossover, that kind of makes it feel like more of a fun event where it does get back into the books. And you've got the covers that have, I believe it's like the Kelly Jones borders with all the skulls and stuff. I mean, it's just a cool crossover. The way that we see this resolved, we know it's a building block for the next couple of big events that come down the line. So it's definitely something that, you can go back to and reread in the collected editions to see how things kind of connect together. So, so I've been enjoying revisiting parts. I mean, actually reading it for the first time, but revisiting the idea of it after knowing about the story for so long.
And something that I've got the big, huge Kelly Jones 75th anniversary Batman book, this gigantic like coffee table book that
the gallery book.
The gallery book. That's such an amazing book. And his, all of his stuff from this story is in there, and it's got, the transparency covers. You can pull back and forth to see the layering that he did for these issues. So that's really kind of cool to see these, really huge and blown up. So for the next podcast that'll be coming out, if things work right, this is Ryan's first time hearing this. As you heard in one of the trailers, we're having the 80th anniversary special all year long, as much as we can get some of these special episodes in. So if everything works right, there will be a commentary track for Young Justice Season 3, Episode 8, with a good friend of mine from another podcast, and we're setting that up. So the next time that we're back on the mic again, we're going to advance a little bit as far as our reading homework, but you'll get more of a synopsis for the story, and we'll see where the road really kind of takes a left turn for Tim and where the tables kind of get turned on the Bat family, that this just isn't a disease that they're fighting, that now there is somebody that they know that this is going to be literally a matter of life and death. So any final things before we roll out of here, Ryan?
I guess that's it. It's just fun to be back in the saddle on the podcast, and it's a cool setup I think we have for these next few episodes, where we get to talk about these fun, bigger crossovers, and then get to delve into the 80th anniversary of Robin. I think it's a really cool setup to keep the party going and keep the everyone part in Everyone Loves the Drake, and not only the Drake, but just Robin as a character. I think it's great.
Yeah. So this is going to be a nice. We did like the whole, 30th anniversary of Tim Drake. This is going to be a really big celebratory year for just Robin as a whole. And like Ryan mentioned, this is going to be leading down to some very big, I think the stories for the Bat family and Tim Drake just keep getting bigger and bigger. And one of the big stories yet to come down the road is No Man's Land. So it's going to be a fun journey there. And I know Ryan will be itching to get to Legacy, and I may even let him sit in the driver's seat for some of those episodes. And I'll
that's a story, a little sneak preview. Like that trade paperback I mentioned earlier, that actually didn't collect the whole story, believe it or not. It was like the meat of the story, but they've recently in recent years released these like updated Legacy Part 1 and 2 trade paperbacks that included all the extra material that they only gave little panels of, in the original release. So I'm excited to go back and read the full story.
Yeah, definitely. Same here. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode, folks. Thanks for tuning in and listening to the BatmanUniverse.net. But more importantly, you've been listening to myself and my host, Ryan Haas, and we'll see you next time